Hi YouTube, my name is Jack, and today we are going to do a video that I've been wanting to do for quite some time now, which is to talk about the relationship between Wicca and sex. So, if you spend any amount of time in witchcraft communities on the internet, you will run across people saying various things along the lines of, Gerald Gardner was a pervert, Wicca is just an excuse for Gardner to get his rocks off, Wicca is a justification for sexual abuse, Wiccans require sexual favors for initiation, etc., etc., etc. And that's not true, but people say it with a great deal of confidence. And so I wanted to just take a couple of minutes, sit down in front of a camera, and talk about the relationship between Wicca and sex, because I think it's an important conversation to have. There are two main things that need to be said about the relationship between Wicca and sex. And the first one, which should be shouted from the rooftops, is that sex is never, ever, ever a requirement for initiation, training, or ritual in the Gardnerian tradition. That is fundamentally not what we're about. It is never a requirement to have sex. And if someone is trying to pressure you into performing sexual favors under the guise of Gardnerian training or initiation, that person is a predator and they are trying to abuse you. It's really, really important to be clear about this because there's a lot of misinformation about it, and that misinformation allows predators to swoop in and take advantage of people and sexually abuse them, right? So let me say, in the cleanest, plainest, simplest terms I can possibly conjure up, sex is not a requirement for Gardnerian Wicca. Point blank. Anyone who tells you differently is a predator, and you need to run away as fast as humanly possible. We, as Gardnerians, have a twofold responsibility here, right? Because sexual abuse does happen in Wicca the same way that it happens in every community. Wherever you have roles of power that can be abused, you will find people who are trying to abuse them, right? Predators by nature seek out, I don't like to say by nature. By nature makes it sound like it's not a choice. Predators choose to seek out positions of power so that they can abuse that power. And that happens in Wicca just like it happens everywhere else. Some of you may remember the horrific saga of Kenny Klein, who I think was a Blue Star Wiccan. I think he was one of the founders of Blue Star. And he turned out to be this monstrous sexual predator, right? It's really, really important for us as Gardnerians, as members of the Gardnerian community, to actively and vocally fight against sexual abuse in our community and to stop it from happening. And that's twofold, right? On one hand, it means that we need to blacklist sexual predators from our community, make them persona non grata, excise them so that they cannot do harm within our community. But secondly, it's really important for us to vocally, loudly, and unambiguously, publicly, so many adverbs, tell people that sex is not a requirement for our tradition. Ever, ever, ever. And anyone who says differently is a predator. And there are people who are predators who might be legitimate Gardnerians. It could happen. Or there are people who might be frauds, who are claiming to be Gardnerians, who don't know what they're talking about, but who are using this claim of Gardnerian legitimacy as an excuse to sexually abuse people who are coming to them and trusting them for training. One very dangerous example of this, there's a man down in Brazil named Martinez, who is a dangerous and horrific fraud, who is not a Gardnerian, but has claimed to be a Gardnerian for years and years and years now. He's caused a lot of trouble for the actual Gardnerians who are down in Brazil. And among the many wrong and frightening things that Mario Martinez claims is that he maintains that sex is a requirement for initiation into his Wicca. That's a lie. and it's predatory, and it's so, so bad, and it's so important that we, as Gardnerians, publicly come out and say that that's not what our tradition is, that's not what we're about, and anyone who tells you differently is trying to abuse you. Abuse is not a part of the Gardnerian tradition. That's the first thing that needs to be said. The second thing that needs to be said is that in non-abusive contexts, in contexts where there are consenting adults who are just, coming together to have sexy times, Wicca is sex positive, right? The generalizations with Wicca are always a little controversial. I'm sure there will be someone out there who will disagree with some of the claims that I'm about to make, but on the whole, I think that what I'm about to say is not terribly controversial, right? Wicca is a religion that teaches that this world, this life that we're in, is good and holy and of the gods, right? The physical world, your body, the incarnation that you're in, this meat suit that you inhabit, is holy, is sacred. And so acts of pleasure, acts of joy, things that make you feel good are also sacred, right? And that's not just sex, that's also good food, that's going for a nice walk in the sunshine, that's taking an afternoon cat nap. The things that reward your body, the things that make you feel good in your body, the things that connect you to your body, are sacred, are holy, and are good. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to be having sex all the time. There are lots of people who aren't interested in sex, and that's okay too, because the idea is that it's about your body and what connects you to your body and what makes you feel sort of happy and at peace in your body. I have a friend, Ursula, who is not Wiccan but was raised sort of around the Wiccan community. And she said something once, I think she might even have tweeted it, but it has stuck with me ever since. She said, have all of the sex that you want and none of the sex that you don't want. And that's it, right? That's the best sex advice I have ever received. And that's very much the Wiccan attitude to sex. By the way, Ursula is a professional astrologer. She's a wonderful astrologer. I've gotten readings from her before. She's excellent. I'll link her website down below. And she also sells magical astrological talismans. So once again, if you're interested, I'll link her website down below. I highly recommend that you check her out. But setting that aside, right? The idea here is that sex is good. Sex is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with sex. Sex isn't naughty, sex isn't shameful, sex isn't dirty. Sex is a thing that people do because people have bodies and bodies feel good. And because our bodies are not inherently shameful or bad, neither is sex. Once again, understanding that we're talking about a situation with consenting adults where there's no power dynamic involved, there's no abuse, it's just people having bodies and coming together to make each other feel good. And that's, unapologetic. And I think that's really beautiful. I started to ramble, so I cut that, and we're going to edit out all of the nonsense that I rambled on, and we're going to try again here with a little bit more coherence. So, we have, right, at the top level, sexual abuse is bad, which is a thing that needs to be repeatedly said. And no one should ever be coercing you into sex in the guise or in the context of Wiccan training. I mean, no one should ever be coercing you into sex, period. But specifically when we're talking about Wicca, Wicca should never ever be used as a justification for sexual coercion. The next thing down that we said was that in the context where it's all above board and people are consenting adults and people are just having sex because they like to have sex, Wicca's basically saying, yeah, go for it, right? Your body is good, your body is holy, and you get to do with it what you choose. The third thing that I think we should talk about in this video is sex magic. Because, sex magic happens, And once again, in Wicca, in a context where there's no coercion happening, in a context where it's two or more people who are all consenting, where it's two or more people who know each other and trust each other and, like, want to do it, and there's no power dynamic between them, if those people decide that they want to use sex as a way of raising power for a spell, who am I to stop them, right? In particular, if you think about, like, if there's a married couple who are trying to have a baby or something, and they want to do a fertility spell in order to help that process along, it would probably be very intuitive and natural to decide that performing an act of ritual sex as part of that spell would be a way to go. Another thing that you'll commonly see is sex magic used for love spells. So if someone is trying to do a spell to attract a long-term partner, and they have a regular hookup who, they're just sexual partners, they're not interested in dating each other, but if those two people decide that they want to have sex as part of a spell to help one of them attract a long-term partner, as long as they're both on board with it, who's going to stop them? Why would you stop them? Because once again, sex is not shameful or dirty or bad. And the same rules apply here. You need to have consent. You need to have enthusiastic consent. You need to have everyone be on board and invested and to want to do it. But if everyone is, why not? While I had the video paused, I went and grabbed my copy of Witchcraft for Tomorrow by Doreen Valiente, which is one of my books in the 13 Books for Gardnerian Seekers video, which I'll link somewhere up here. But she has a chapter in this book called Witchcraft and Sex Magic. And the first line of this book, the first sentence, or of this chapter rather, the first sentence of the chapter says, "Witchcraft does not need to apologize for involving sex magic. It is other religions which need to apologize for the miseries of puritanical repression they have inflicted on humanity." There is something powerful about sex. There is something magical about sex. Sex can be just people have bodies and bodies feel good, but sex can also be something deep and transcendent and powerful. And if a witch wants to leverage that, there's nothing wrong with that. So just sort of flipping ahead a little bit, this is, once again, from the same chapter of the book. Doreen says, "There is an indefinable magical element about sex, which people have been conscious of ever since the beginning of time. This is why it has always been hedged about with so many rules and regulations by those who have sought rulership over their fellow humans. In particular, the subjugation of woman, the dangerous temptress, has been built into most of the world religions of our day." So, witchcraft, I'm going to get in trouble for trying to define witchcraft. Witchcraft, in a general sense, acknowledging that there are exceptions maybe with people who use the term differently, witchcraft involves the claiming of power in a subversive way. And sex, particularly women's sexuality, is both subversive and powerful. So people may leverage that in the context of magic if they want to do that with a partner. And, I'm not gonna raise a shitstorm about that. That's their right to make that choice. Now, this is something that should never be foisted upon anyone, right? This is something that should be like two consenting adults who aren't in a power dynamic no one has power over here. Two consenting adults who are two or more, I suppose, consenting adults, depending on what your sexual relationships are like, who are deciding that they're going to use a sexual connection and build that towards a magical connection. And once again, have all the sex you want to have and none of the sex you don't want to have. Do all the sex magic that you want to do and none of the sex magic you don't want to do. If people aren't interested in doing sex magic, then they don't and shouldn't have to. I have never done a spell with a partner that drew on sex magic. But for the people who choose to, especially especially if you have like a married couple who are going to do a sexual spell in the privacy of their own home, why would I care? Sex is holy. Sex is powerful and magical. And if they want to draw on that, go right ahead. So I started the video by saying there were 3 things that needed to be discussed about sex and Wicca. Turns out, or I started by saying there were 2 things. Turns out there were 3. Number 1, sex is never, ever, ever a requirement for initiation, training, or ritual in the Gardnerian tradition. Number 2, consensual sex between adults is totally fine, and people should feel free to have sex or not have sex, to be sexual or to be not sexual, as they choose. And number 3 is that, once again, with the caveat that this has to be a matter of consenting adults. There can't be a power dynamic. It can't be something that anyone is ever coerced or pressured into. But if consenting adults decide that they want to use sex in a magical context for the purposes of a spell or whatever, they can go for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And, sex is not dirty or naughty or bad. So I think I'm going to wrap the video up here. I tried filming this video like 10 times, and I kept sort of tripping over it and, feeling like I wasn't saying exactly what I wanted to say. I'm still not perfectly satisfied with this, but I feel like I got the points across that I was trying to make. So we'll end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.